everyone, it's Erin with Hail Varsity. I am joined by recruiting extraordinaire Greg Smith, also of Hail Varsity, and we are back for another recruiting question of the week. Before we dive in, Greg, how are you?
I am very well. It's Monday, but we're hanging in there.
We are. We actually, if you are somebody watching this, we just recorded a podcast, so you should check out Greg's Straight Up Breakdown podcast, not just because I'm on it this week, but you should check out every episode that he hosts, which you can also find that at hailvarsity.com or right here on our YouTube channel if you're watching it here. We have all the episodes upload here as well in case that's easy for you, but you can find them on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. But let's dive into the question. It is a 2-for-1 special this week. Two people sort of asked similar questions, one from Logan, one from Jason. So let's start here. Jason was wanting to know, is the Nebraska staff still recruiting players that fit their style of play regardless of stars? And then Logan asked, how do the coaches start to make up their recruit list and board? Is it a combo of endless hours of game film each year, relying on trusted analysts, rely on trusted high school coaches? How much of each option and all of these things, like looking at different services? So again, are they still recruiting a certain style of player? And then how are they even finding these players? Greg, what do you think?
I'm gonna start with the second part of the 2-for-1 special because it's all of the above on that. And it's actually really fascinating on how this all kind of comes together, because if you imagine it, when you guys go out and you look at, say, whatever recruiting service and you see that giant list of players all being ranked, remember that there's also, in addition to that, hundreds of players that have not been ranked. Those rankings are evolving. Nebraska doesn't even always start with that. I can tell you there's a giant spreadsheet that each coach has that just has a bunch of information about a lot of different players. And every time they find out about someone just gets dumped into that spreadsheet. And that ends up as kind of the starting point of what's happening. And it does kind of start with the analysts that they have on staff, the recruiting coordinators, all the director of player personnel, all of those people. It's their job to kind of organize all of that. But then also you do have to rely on trusted relationships with high school coaches, because that's how you then find out about players before they really hit recruiting services. You think about it this way: once a guy is on a service and like we're doing interviews with him, everyone knows about him at that point, right? So it's Nebraska's job in a way to find out about those guys before we kind of do, and before everyone in the country has found out about them. So it's a huge combination of a lot of those things. And it's a lot of hard work that goes in behind the scenes on that. Now, as far as figuring out like the first part of the question with the particular style that Nebraska is looking for, yeah, they're still looking for a particular fit, and all schools are looking for a fit to their particular style of play. Personality traits, everybody is looking for, like even, your Alabamas, Ohio States, and Clemson, they're kind of the example of like what's happening at the very top level of recruiting. Like even as they're recruiting all of the 5-stars in the world, like they're still recruiting particular 5-stars and high 4-stars, right? And so that just trickles down to everyone. Everyone has their own version of that. It just depends on how big of a pool you get to select from.
Yeah, and it's interesting that I've always taken away from, reading some of what you've put together, but then also in conversations I've had with some of the Nebraska football staff, like they also are, I think what's such a key part in finding those players before they become the player that is being recruited by everyone who maybe now has, higher star ratings because that's continuously evaluated, is they don't just talk to the coaches. They don't just talk to the people that are immediately around that player. They're walking the hallways and talking to the school custodian and asking them, hey, what do you think of this kid? Are they nice? What are they like in the hallway when no one's watching? And so receiving information from different sources and understanding that all eyes are on you when you are being recruited. It's just a good life lesson that people are paying attention. And that is oftentimes how they find somebody. Is, I can't remember who it was, but I remember a coach one time saying, yeah, I was actually there to get to see this other athlete. And it was a teacher who said, hey, you should take a look at this athlete, and ended up getting recruited because a teacher had said, this is a great student, and you might be interested in them. So you just don't know who's going to give you a recommendation. And so when you're recruiting, you kind of have to keep your eyes open for all possible opportunities.
Yeah, and that's one of the key things that was missed in this last year in that 2021 class when coaches, obviously because of the pandemic could not go out on the road. That is a huge component of that. Like when you're going in to, like, just to use a big example, like when Scott Frost and those guys are going into Lewis Central High School to talk to Thomas Bedoni's coach. If they had been able to do that, they weren't because he was in that class. But if they had done that, they may say as well, hey, do you have any underclassmen that I need to speak with? The same way that you would hear that from a teacher, you also get that from the coach. And that's how you start to also build those relationships. Sean Beckton, but just as a singular call out, is really good at that because he has so many connections down south, particularly in Georgia and Florida, where he knows all of the kids from a young age because those coaches give him those recommendations so early. And so it's really kind of like neat peeling the onion layers back in a lot of ways of how people find out about these guys early because they're tipped off to various players. And that doesn't just happen at one school, it's happening at multiple schools. And so it's a really neat thing.
Yeah, that's, again, it goes back to the fact that people just are always watching. So, I mean, if you know a recruit, always tell them, like, be mindful of how you work everywhere in your life, because that's sometimes how you find the kind of like the hidden gems that end up blowing up because suddenly now everyone becomes aware of them. But it is really interesting. I find these two questions particularly, the style of play one too has been a talking point on Twitter recently. I've seen a lot of people talking about, like, what is the style of play that they're looking for, and I don't know if I think much has changed. It's just maybe evolved. And for the record, I just want to say this for all of you who watched our video last week and said, why didn't you talk about McKenzie Milton? He is the prototypical Scott Frost quarterback. Y'all are right. We could have just said Milton. You are right. That is definitely, I think, who he wants as a quarterback, and that has not changed. I think that is definitely still the style, but things do evolve in time, and there are different looks there are different styles or talents of one player versus another that they look at. So
yeah, I would push back slightly on that and say that in your evolving example, that it had to evolve to then have a bigger quarterback because McKenzie Milton, and we'll see what happens in this case when he goes to Florida State, but McKenzie Milton in the Big Ten versus the AAC would have been a little bit different. No shade to McKenzie Milton, though.
No. But somebody's still going to come in the comments and think,
yeah, I mean, sorry. Yeah,
all the respect. Well, if you want to know more about this topic, and I know you do, Greg will have a deeper dive on all of the recruiting. Here's the thing. You need to just bookmark the recruiting notebook. It is Sunday through Thursday, 6 p.m. Central at Hail Varsity. On Mondays, Greg does a deeper dive on this recruiting question. So please check it out. Go head there this evening. We'd love to see you, but keep having these conversations. We really appreciate it. Like I said, we saw all the comments on McKenzie Milton last week, so we appreciate it. We are listening. But yeah, leave questions, comments, send your questions to Greg at Greg Smith HV, or you can send them to at Hail Varsity on Twitter. And we'll be back next week for even more. But again, check out the recruiting notebook. Greg will have a deeper dive on this very topic later this evening. Greg, any final words?
Thank you. Keep having the conversation, and we'll be back next week.
Sounds good. Well, thank you again. We'll talk to you next week.